अगर तू मुझे नवाजे तेरा कर्म है वरना तेरी रहमतों का बदला मेरी बंदगी नहीं। काशी टीवी देखਣ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਸਲਾਮ, ਨਮਸਤੇ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਬਲਬੀਰ ਕੌਰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਈ ਹਾਂ ਹੈਲਥ ਟਾਕ ਸ਼ੋ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਐਸ਼ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਲॉज ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ। ਸੋ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਲਾਂਗੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਲॉज ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਇੰਕਲੂਡ ਨੇ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਮੈਰਿਜ, डिवोर्स, wills, so we will have so much information from Ash today। चलते हैं Ash जी का स्वागत करते हुए काशी टीवी ते। सत श्री अकाल, नमस्ते Ash, welcome to our Kashi TV। So can you introduce yourself please?
So my name's Ash, and like you said in your introduction, and I'm an experienced family solicitor and I'm 15 years qualified. I was also recommended in the Legal 500 as well, which is the directory for the lawyers, in 2017 by name, and I specialise in all aspects of matrimonial law, so divorce, separation, financial settlements in divorce, children law, so any issues in relation to child arrangements, and domestic relocation. So if one party like the mother or the father wants to move to another area in the UK and the other parent refuses, so and also if one parent wants to move abroad and the other parent is living here, so domestic and international relocation as well, and also prenuptial agreements and domestic abuse.
Oh my God, you're a woman with many talents, aren't you?
a woman with many talents, but the beauty of family law is that it's quite diverse. So I started my training as a family law solicitor in Slough in Berkshire, so I'm from Slough, and I started with a legal aid practice. So many years ago when the legal aid was legal aid has diminished over the years. So it's very difficult now to obtain legal aid on cases. There needs to be an issue of domestic violence. So I started out with a legal aid practice in Slough. And I used to follow the barristers, so I would be at court in Slough, in Reading, in London, in Milton Keynes, in Oxford, in Brighton. So, and one day I could be dealing with an injunction order where there's been maybe the wife has been the victim of domestic abuse and she's applied for an injunction against her husband. So we have to go to court and apply for an emergency application, or we could be dealing with a children matter where there's a dispute in relation to contact, how much time the child should spend with one parent, and there's a dispute or who the child should live with. And also I could be for example dealing with financial issues. So when a person goes through a divorce, they have to resolve their financial matters. So I could be at court sitting behind the barrister trying to negotiate with the other party, with the husband's solicitors if I'm acting for the wife on their financial matters. So very diverse. So you could be dealing with different issues day in, day out, and every party's case is different. Every case turns on its own facts.
So it's like every day is different for you, isn't it, Ash? Every single day. You don't know what to expect from a day when you start, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's not. It's very. You could dealing with different issues each day, and with family law as well. There's lots of live issues at the moment that's happening because of COVID-19 as well. A lot of issues have arisen because a lot of people's whose relationships or marriages, which were not as may have been teetering or quite breaking already, and when they entered the lockdown, and people have been forced to live with each other under one roof 24 hours a day. That's put pressure on people's relationships. And now we've seen a spike in divorce rates. Usually we see the spike after Christmas and at the beginning of January, but now we're seeing a spike in divorce rates following the restrictions being lifted from lockdown, and more people are now have decided they want to go ahead and separate or get a divorce. Because they've just realised that they don't want to. They have nothing in common. They've been trapped with their partners, and they want to go their separate ways.
Okay, what motivated you to be a solicitor actually? You know, you're really young, aren't you? So what really motivated you? Did you, after the, you know, doing A-levels, did you straight away decide I wanted to be a solicitor, or it took you some time?
No, I think more family pressure.
Oh, so family pressure.
Typical for Asian family, so either a doctor, lawyer or accountant.
Okay.
I wanted to work for the diplomatic service.
Okay.
I wanted to work for the British government. I wanted to be a spy.
Okay. So before we start, like, what is a legal marriage? What we count as a legal marriage?
Yeah, so with legal marriage, is where you've been under the law, you've been legally married, where you've had the civil marriage. So you've been to go to the registry, you have a registration, your marriage is registered, and you have a marriage certificate. So a lot of people, there's some confusion about marriages being legal, so they've only had the religious marriages, so they've only had the nikah, which is the Islamic marriage, or they've just been they've got married in the like they've had a nikah maybe not in the mosque, or they've had it in the restaurant or at home, or for example they've just got married, they've had a religious marriage in the Gurdwara, or and they've not had a civil marriage. Okay. So those marriages are not legally recognised, but under the Marriage Act, if you've got married, if you meet certain criteria, you've been married in the temple or in the mosque, and you've met certain criteria, that could create a legal marriage. But in most circumstances, and in my daily practice, I'm finding a lot of women who've only had the nikah, or they've only had the religious marriage, and their marriages are broken down, and they don't have the same protection as married couples. So those people who've only had the religious marriage, and they've not had their marriages formalised and had this into a legal marriage and not had the civil registration, then they will be treated as just cohabitees, i.e. they've just like been living together, and they don't have the same rights as married couples. So their financial, so when they come on their breakdown of their marriage, they will have very limited financial claims.
Okay, let me just explain.
It's a big problem
at the moment.
Yeah.
So जिदा ऐश explain कर रही है कि marriage जेड़ी है कि भावें तुसी गुरुद्वारे च विआह करांदे हो, चर्च च विआह करांदे हो, या फिर मस्जिद दे विच तुसी निकाह पढ़दे हो या फेरे लेंदे हो, वो तद तक legally married नहीं काउंट होंदी ਜਦੋਂ तक तुसी civil marriage, registered marriage नहीं करांदे। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ काफ़ी उलझना इस टाइम ते स्पैशली UK ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਹੀਆਂ। ਕਈਆਂ ਦੇ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਵੀ ਦੋ ਵਿਆਹ ਵੀ ਹੋਏ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇ ਗੋਟ ਮੈਰਿਡ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਜਾਂ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ 'ਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਵਿਆਹ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਦੂਸਰਾ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਵਿਆਹ ਮੰਨਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਲਈ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਦੂਸਰੀਆਂ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਾਊਂਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ। ਉਹ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਕਪਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਪਰ ਲੀਗਲ ਰਾਈਟ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੀ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੈਰਿਜ। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕਾਊਂਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਹੋਏ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਊਂਟ ਹੋਏਗਾ। ਜਦ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਸਿਵਲ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣ ਸਕਦੇ। ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਵੈਰੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ, ਜੇਕਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵਿਆਹੇ ਹੋਏ ਹੋ, ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ 'ਚ ਵਿਆਹ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਚਰਚ 'ਚ ਹੋਇਆ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫੇਰੇ ਲਿੱਤੇ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰਾਓ ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਈ।
Yes, and just picking up on what you said as well, sometimes people from here, like a lot of boys, they will marry girls from back home, like India or Pakistan, but if they've got married over there and they've got married according to their laws and customs, then that marriage is legally recognised. So if they bring the girl from India over here or from Pakistan, that marriage is legally recognised here. So I'm just to clarify that issue. So
if they are in India or Pakistan, and if they are registered.
So what I'm trying to say is that if, for example, a boy, British born boy of Indian origin or of Pakistani origin marries a girl from back home and he brings her over and they've got married according to the customs, the marriage in India or Pakistan, that marriage is legally recognised here.
जी हाँ जी, जिदा दस्सिया कि जेकर तुहाडा विआह इंडिया इत्थों दी कोई ब्रिटिश सिटीजन जिहड़ा हैगा इंडिया, पाकिस्तान या बांग्लादेश किथे भी जाके विआह करांदा, उत्थे दे कस्टम्स दे हिसाब दे नाल ते ओह मैरिज जिहड़ी हैगी है काउंट होंदी हैगी आ। Yeah.
It's just a difference as well. So, but if you got married here and you've only had the religious marriage and you've not had that marriage registered, the civil registration, then that marriage is not legally recognized.
So बहुत important है कि civil registration जरूर करानी पैंदी है जेकर तुसी marriage दा हक चाहते हो.
And also some
yes,
just
that's
picking
fine.
up on the religious marriages and legality of religious marriages as well, is sometimes as well if whoever's conducting the marriage, the imam or the priest, is to probably have a dialogue, a conversation with them prior so that they to understand what the steps are to legalize if it's in the Gurdwara or if it's outside of the mosque or the temple as well. So and what I'm part of a campaign called Register Our Marriage, which is a campaign where we're lobbying the government to highlight this issue, because there's certain areas all over the UK, up north, in the Midlands and down south, where this is a growing problem, and we're trying to lobby the government to reform the Marriage Act to make all marriages from all denominations legal.
Okay, yeah. So nobody wants to have a divorce basically, and what are the reasons firstly to have a divorce? There is many reasons, I'm sure, but what you come across with the divorce reasons?
Okay, so when a lot of people in my daily practice, I have people who come to me saying that their marriages have broken down, usually because of domestic abuse or the other part.
So that's the highlight one, you can say, or the main.
So there's the main, maybe like there's different facts which you can rely on.
Yeah.
Adultery. So if you're going to petition, if you're going to go through divorce proceedings under the current law, you have to rely on, you have to lay blame on the other party.
Okay.
So you have to rely on, example, that person's behaviour, adultery, or they've deserted you, or 2-year separation or 5-year separation. So you have to rely on one of those 5 facts to put under the current law, which is unfortunately is fault-based. But the law, the new law, there's a new law that's come in, it's changed, and it's going to be implemented next year, which is going to introduce no-fault divorce.
कि जिदा कि ऐश दस रहे ने कोई भी डिवोर्स होने ਲਈ ਇਹ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਰਸਨ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਫਾਲਟ ਹੋਣੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਐਂਡ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 5 ਫੈਕਟਰ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਐਸ਼ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਹੋਣੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਆਧਾਰ ਤੇ ਹੀ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਬਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਨਵਾਂ ਲੋ ਐਸਟੈਬਲਿਸ਼ ਹੋਣ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਜੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਿਹਦੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਗਰ ਮਿਲੇ
it is new law but it's going to be come into force next year
so ਨਵਾਂ ਲੋ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਹੋਣ ਲੱਗਾ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਈਅਰ तो इंप्लीमेंट ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਣਾ ਉਹ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਤੇ ਪਰ ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਐਸ਼ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਬਲੇਮ ਹੋਏ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਪਰ ਹੁਣ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਬਲੇਮ ਨਾ ਵੀ ਹੋਏ ਅਗਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ
So some people might be in situations where they want to get a divorce, but they're very maybe their husband they've been victims of domestic abuse, or for example the other party is very controlling. So when I have clients who come to me, women who come to me, they say their marriages are broken down. They say because the husband, his behaviour it's unreasonable, or they're very controlling, they've suffered from domestic abuse, those type of, like where you see a lot of women coming relying on, saying they've suffered this and their marriages are broken down because of that. But it might be difficult for one party under the current law to go to proceed with the divorce under the current law, because that party may not want to give them the divorce and might want to make it very difficult, so they may defend or cross petition and try and control the divorce proceedings. But under the new law that's going to completely change, because under the new law the other party won't have the ability to defend or cross the petition. It'll become much easier to divorce, and also the time frame for the divorce, they'll minimise delay as well. So it's just going to become much easier. Yeah.
Which I think it sounds really promising as well, because it's
a step forward. It's a step forward, and for those people who maybe want to go, who want to divorce, but they think there's going to cause more acrimony if they do it now, they can wait until the new law comes into force, because it's going to become much easier.
I think it's really, really good, because it's a time saving, money saving as well, especially the time consuming as well. Like, you know, a lot of people wait for certain time, the other party has to be agreed for the divorce, and in cases the other person is taking too long, or they are not making their mind up as well, or playing up some time as well.
Up, like you say, they can drag it out. They can drag it out, cause delays, so they might not sign the paperwork. So if the wife issues the petition and the court sends the husband the paperwork, he might not sign the paperwork, so that causes more delay. So then she might then have to instruct an agent to go and serve the paperwork on him, because you have to prove to the court that that other party is aware of the divorce proceedings, he has the paperwork. So the other party can make things difficult, or they can contest the divorce, or they can defend it to drag it out, which is more costly for the parties. But that's all going to change under the new law.
Brilliant. I think they have experienced so much that they have to change as the time is changing as well. And probably in your timing, you probably seen how many divorce you probably seen already happening. And what do you think in our Asian community, people are coming forward to give divorce, or they are still halfway through and they say we don't want to give the divorce certain time? In our culture,
I think the taboo, the stigma is still there. It's changing. I think we're living in a more multicultural society, more modern society. I think many years ago it would have been difficult for our parents maybe to divorce because of the stigma attached and the communities that they live in. But now I see many people, Asian, divorce is quite common. You've got families now consisting of step parents as well, step children as well. No longer the nuclear family with 2.4 children. So we've evolved as a society. So I think the government's recognised that. So they've revolutionised because the current divorce law is very it's not modern, it's very entrenched and it's and I think it's the new there's been a lot of lobby and pressure on the government to change the law, which they've now done, to modernise the law and bring it up to the 20th century, the 21st century, to represent a more society where the families, we have different family structures, and no longer the nuclear family, lots of step parents.
I think before, like I can talk about my parents or your parents that time, divorce no काफी बुरा मन्या जाता सी that time ki, and ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ I think people used to suffer a lot. It's like compromise कर लिया, and you staying with that person who's abusing you, and I've seen so many anyway, and still happening. Still ਜਿਹੜਾ divorce ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਹਜੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ बुरा ਮੰਨਦੇ ਆ. There is a lot of in our families as well, we see around as well. But before we consider divorce, what things you need to make sure that you need to have it before you consider divorce?
So some tips I would like to share if you're about to go through divorce proceedings. So I think it's number one, ensure that you speak to maybe 2 or 3 solicitors and find a solicitor that you are comfortable with. Self-care is important. Someone going through a divorce, a breakdown in relationship, very emotional, very emotional, very turbulent. There could be a lot of acrimony. Not all cases are amicable. So it might be that you go seek some counselling or professional support as well, to help with your mindset and to help you, guide you through your divorce journey. If you're going to start divorce proceedings, tip number 3, you need to obtain your original marriage certificate. So, because with the original marriage certificate, you need to send that with the court when you petition, and you will never see that again. The court will retain that indefinitely. And also, if your your husband's left the house and you're in the house with the children alone, then you might want to consider you might want to consider applying for like benefits, like universal credit, and you may also wish to apply, check if you are eligible for a council tax discount.
So there is a lot of things to consider before you apply for
there's
divorce.
lots of things to consider, and those are just some of my tips, useful tips that you should start thinking about before considering going through a divorce.
How to apply for divorce? How can you apply if you freshly ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ listeners ਨੇ ਉਹ ਕੋਈ divorce ਲਈ apply ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ apply ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ divorce?
So you can apply, so you need to be legally married for 1 year before you can apply for an English divorce.
1 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਆਹ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ before you apply for a divorce.
Yeah, so 1 year you have to be legally married, and then once the 1 year is passed you can apply for the divorce.
So ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਵੀ ਲੀਗਲੀ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਜਾਣਨਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅਗਰ 1 ਸਾਲ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. What other things you need to be consider?
Could also to consider as well what ground, which were the facts that we talked about. So who's going to petition for the divorce? Is it going to be the husband or is it going to be the wife who's going to petition?
So ground
they need to agree if they can who's going to petition for the divorce.
So ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਅਗਰੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਨਾਲੇ ਕੌਣ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਹਸਬੈਂਡ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਵਾਈਫ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਗਰਾਊਂਡਸ ਨੇ ਕਿਸ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ.
And then once you've decided who's going to petition, if it's going to be the wife or the husband, and you've decided which fact you're going to rely on, i.e. the behaviour or adultery or 2-year separation and 5 year separation, then you would you could either do the online. So the court now has developed an online system, a digital platform where you can issue your petition online. So you can do the petition online.
Okay.
We're moving so the courts are now advancing towards technology as well to minimise delay and encouraging legal practitioners and also people who don't want to instruct solicitors and want to do it themselves to do it online.
So basically if they don't want to go to solicitor they can apply online as well.
They can apply online using the digital platform, the portal, the divorce portal on the HMCTS website.
Okay, ਜੇਕਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੋਲਿਸਿਟਰ ਕੋਲ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਤੇ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਵੀ ਸੋਲਿਸਿਟਰ ਕੋਲ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗੇਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਮਨੀ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਜੇਕਰ ਬੋਥ ਪਾਰਟੀਜ਼ ਐਗਰੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਫੈਕਟਸ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਸ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਲਈ ਅਪਲਾਈ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ.
And it's a step-by-step process. So usually with a divorce, if it's all amicable, straightforward, and the other party signs the paperwork, usually 3 to 6 months.
Okay, so 3 to 6 ਮਹੀਨੇ. Yes, 3 to 6 months ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ depending on ਕਈ circumstance ਕਰਕੇ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ 3 ਤੋਂ 6 ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ. ਤੇ when is finalized actually that it's a divorce now legally, it's divorce?
So the final decree, so there's a two-stage process. So the halfway stage is the decree nisi, the conditional divorce order, and then the final, which you can final divorce, which you can apply 6 weeks after the decree nisi, is called the decree absolute, which is the final decree. But in most cases where you're trying to sort out your financial matters alongside the divorce, you would not normally apply for the decree absolute until the financial matters have been approved by the court by way of a court order. So straightforward, yet decree absolute is the final decree, and the decree nisi is a halfway stage. But then if you resolve the financial matters, and if the husband has pensions or there's properties, then usually to protect the other party's position you wouldn't apply for the decree absolute until the finances have all been resolved and approved by the court.
So basically it's a 2-stage, isn't it? So stage 1 is it?
Divorce is a two. So you issue the petition, you apply for it, the court issues it, they send the paperwork to the other party, they acknowledge the paperwork, then they send the paperwork back, and then you apply for the decree nisi if you're acting for the petitioner. And then the court will then list the matter for pronouncement of decree nisi, and then 6 weeks after that you can apply for the decree absolute.
ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਦੋ ਸਟੇਜਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਦੀਆਂ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਐਸ਼ ਨੇ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤਾ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਾਊਂਟ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸੋ ਐਸ਼, ਅਗਰ ਲਾਈਕ ਸਰਕਮਸਟੈਂਸ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਵਾਈਲ ਯੂ ਹੈਵਿੰਗ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ, what's
you can write to the court, so you can it depends on what stage you've reached in the divorce as well. So if you, before the decree nisi, you can write to the court and say you want to withdraw, they've reconciled, and can they return the marriage certificate as well. If the decree nisi has been pronounced, then the court can rescind. It's called rescind the decree nisi. So you can write to the court and ask the court to, depending on what stage you're at, and apply to the court and say, look, we've reconciliated and we want to now withdraw the petition.
So any stage you can withdraw.
You can withdraw before, and you can then, but then if it's after the decree nisi, then you've got to make a formal application, ask the court to rescind the decree nisi. But once you've reached the final, then you've divorced. So then,
okay, so it's not,
yeah.
So if you want to get married, you have to get married again.
You have to get married again, yeah.
Well, that's less likely happens, but you never know.
It happens. Sometimes it does happen where you have couples say that I've had it once or twice.
Okay.
I've had it once or twice, and I had to write back to the court and say, look, they've reconciled, and can we return the original marriage certificate? That's happened before the decree nisi.
Okay.
So yeah, you can do. You've got that option.
It's probably they're going to solicitor too much and talking with each other.
Yeah. I mean, divorce is a big decision.
Very big
especially
decision.
If you have children. Especially if you have children, and it's you've got to think about even like when you're going to select a solicitor or choose a solicitor, it's very important that you feel comfortable with that solicitor, and that solicitor listens to what you have to say, and they can whatever you tell them, they can listen without making any judgment, and listen sympathetically and empathetically, and ensure that any outcome they achieve is best for you and your future and your children.
Okay.
And addresses your needs.
All right, it's quite a big decision as well, especially
big decision.
I don't know if when couples having a divorce, do they have counselling, like family counselling or something as well?
So sometimes when I have clients who come to me, a wife or a husband, I would encourage them to attend counselling, like relate, or speak to a marriage counsellor, and that's up to them if they want to do that. One party might want to go, the other party might not want to go, which is usually the case. You can give the advice, you make the suggestion, and it's up to your client whether or not they want to attend, and also whether the other party, because it's a two-way, it's a mutual decision between the both of them. And yes, you should encourage them to go. But sometimes I have clients where they come to me and that stage is past. The counselling is not an
It's
option.
too long. They have already made their mind.
They've already made their mind up, and they want to go ahead with the divorce. So a lot of I'm seeing is now where the divorce rates have risen in couples over the age range of 50 and 60. So more and more people who are in that bracket are getting divorced. So they've been married for many years, their children have flown the nests, the children are independent, they've left home, and they're now saying, well, you know what, we've got nothing in common and we want to divorce, and we want to go our separate ways. So that the rate has risen in that population.
So 50 to 60 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਵੀ it's more likely they try.
The divorce rates have risen.
Oh, that's interesting actually, because that time you have seen person's proper personality actually, isn't it? Either you want to stay or you don't want to stay.
And they've realised that, you know what, our children are gone, they've left home, they're independent or they're married, and we want to go our separate, we've got nothing in common.
So Ash, would you tell us more about no-fault divorce in UK, which is going to be, as you say, it's going to be start from next year?
The Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act, received royal assent, just in Parliament recently. So when lockdown restrictions were being eased, and we were coming out of the lockdown, Boris pushed through that bill through Parliament, and it is now the law, but it's it will be coming to force hopefully next autumn, is the indication. And under the new law, it's going to introduce no fault divorce. So it's going to be very easy to divorce, and you can issue a joint application. So two, husband and wife, can issue a joint application, but also one party can also still apply.
Divorce.
Apply. And also it's going to create a minimum time frame from the issuing the petition, 20 weeks up to the decree nisi stage, and then apply for the decree. So
okay, so 20 weeks.
I think it's 20 weeks from the divorce time, from issuing it up to the decree nisi, and then you apply for the decree absolute, and then 6 weeks, which is what we've got under the current law, will be retained, and 6 weeks from the decree nisi to the decree absolute. So the minimum to minimise delay, but also that the minimum time frame that introduced from the issuing the petition and to the decree will give also the parties to think about things as well, and if they want to go back and go do counselling, or they want to try and negotiate child arrangements, they've got that time frame to do that as well. So it's just becoming more, being more amicable and more easier. The other party can't contest or defend the divorce, and make the procedure more transparent and straightforward as well. Which unfortunately under the current law, if one party opposes it, it can be very difficult, and it can increase costs as well. So
in a way it's good as well, but it's make you scared as well, isn't it, in both sides? Because marriage is you think it's lots of people spend a lot of money on it as well, especially अपने Asian culture च जितना आप देखते हैं किन्ने पैसे, and जदों हुए भी one person is committed to their marriage and other person is not, and they can easily get divorced anytime. It's quite scary. I mean, I feel scary.
The Church of England have expressed reviews that they're not happy at all with the new law, because they say that it undermines the concept of marriage. So so there's been a lot of debate.
I can understand, because there's two type of people it's gonna be, but then again it's really hard for those people who've been suffering with a marriage which is not working out for them, and which is not nice. So it will be advantage for some, and it can be disadvantage as well. So we go with the positivity.
I think it's a step in the right direction.
And as things are changing, so we have to change what circumstance nowadays are. People are scared to get married as well, because they know it's going to be, if we have to get divorced, there will be a lot of restriction as well. So
the statistics show that more and more people are living together. So less people are getting married and more people are living together. So like cohabitees, but then again, like we discussed earlier as well, with about religious marriages and people just having the Islamic, or they just have the religious marriage. They don't have the same rights as married couples. So if they have a property and they've bought a property with their husband, or the husband's bought the property in the marriage and it's in his name, but the wife has paid the mortgage, or she's contributed towards the bills, or she's given him some money to make improvements of the property or add an extension, then she could say, well, okay, I've got a beneficial interest in that property, I have a beneficial interest in that property, and but then the burden will be on her to prove that she's got that beneficial interest. And this is where we're talking where there's been just a no legal marriage, and they may have just had a religious marriage which is not legally recognised, or they've cohabitees, are treated as cohabitees, and they don't have the same rights, but then then property law applies. It's very complicated. It's called trust law, and the court will look at the parties' conduct during the relationship, and whether that's changed over the course of their relationship. And if that house is in the husband's name, then the burden will be on that other party to prove that they have an interest in that property. And those type of is a civil procedure, and if you end up in court, it can be very costly, time consuming, and if she can't prove the case, the other party can't prove their case, she could potentially pay the other party's costs as well. So it's really important that if you only had the religious marriage, that you make sure that you go out and have that make inquiries and get that marriage registered.
Definitely.
To ensure that if anything did happen in the future, you've got rights. You can make financial claims like a married couple would do if they were about to divorce. So that's very, very important.
I think it's very important when you decide to get married with each other to decide what's if there is any consequence happen with you're going to have a divorce. So what you will be doing.
And that's why under the Register Our Marriage campaign we're educating leaders, religious leaders as well, to ensure that if they're conducting the ceremonies, that they ensure that the couples understand what the implications are if they don't have if they only go ahead with the religious and they don't have that marriage registered, what the implications for them under the law if that marriage breaks down and they've not had their marriage registered, had the civil registration.
Ash, don't you think ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹ ਲਓ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੌਸਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜਾਂ ਮੰਦਿਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਚਰਚ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਪੀਪਲ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੈਰਿਜਸ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਰਿਸਪੌਂਸਿਬਿਲਟੀ ਬਣਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਦੇ ਸ਼ੁੱਡ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਪਲਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਡਵਾਈਸ ਦੇਣੀ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰਾਣੀ ਅਦਰਵਾਈਜ਼ ਇਨ UK ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਜੇਕਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਵਿਆਹ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ
I feel that's important that they should have that dialogue with the couples, and that's what we're highlighting in the Register Our Marriage campaign to educate the leaders as well, the religious leaders, the imams, the priests as well who are conducting these marriages, that those couples, those young couples who are getting married or elderly couples who are entering, that they understand what their rights are.
When they're having divorce, can court say no, you can't have the divorce like for certain time?
So we had one case, a lady in Worcestershire, which highlighted lobbied the pressure on the government, where she petitioned on her husband's behaviour, and the court rejected, saying that her husband defended her petition, and it went to trial, and the judge agreed with him and said the grounds weren't sufficient. The examples she provided of his behaviour were not sufficient to satisfy the test in the law. So her case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
It went all the way to the highest court in the land, and the judges said that we can only interpret the law, we can't change the law. So following that case, her name was Tina Owens, a lady who lives in Worcestershire. Very long marriage, suffered domestic abuse, husband very controlling, and the court said that we can only interpret, we can't change it. So she then had to wait 5 years before she could divorce him.
Oh, that's a good battle, Tina. Salute to you, actually. So the law is changing because of certain women has. She suffered a lot, but it's making a difference to change the law in certain areas.
So her case did highlight the fact that our law needs to change.
So what is child custody, when we're having a divorce and there is a children obviously involved, so what's that?
So if the mother and father, they're divorcing, if they can reach an amicable agreement on the child arrangements, that's fine. Then you don't need to have that agreement rubber stamped by the court. Okay. So if they are flexible and the arrangements are practical and they're happy, they both agree, look, this is what's in the best interest of our children, and we're happy with this arrangement, they just run with the agreement. But if they can't agree, then they can look at options are to look at mediation. So mediation, they can attend mediation and sit down with a family law mediator and try and reach an agreement by having various meetings with the mediator, joint meetings or single meetings, and try and reach an agreement on the child arrangements. If they do reach an agreement, then I would recommend that whoever the solicitors write to the other party and say, look, we've reached an agreement, this is what the agreement is as well. But bearing in mind, if they reach an agreement at mediation, those discussions cannot be. You can't refer to those discussions if court proceedings were issued. So if they reach an agreement between themselves, I think it would be helpful if then their one party said to the solicitor, look, we've reached this agreement, can you just confirm it in writing? So then if there was any difficulties or issues arising in the future, and then one party ended up making an application to the court, then you've got something in writing to say we've had this agreement, we've been following this agreement, but then you know what issues have arisen, and now we can't agree, and we need the court to now decide on what needs to be, you know, it depends what the dispute is, if it's who the children should live with, or the amount of time the argument is about the amount of time, like one parent saying no, I want them for this amount of time, other parent saying no, I want more of the care of the children. So there's lots of issues. So with the child arrangements, if you cannot agree, then you need to go to mediation first before you can apply to the court. You need to go to mediation first, and then if you can't agree at mediation, then you need to make an application to the court for a child arrangements order, where the court will then decide, and then there's a process involved.
Okay. Does child have his says as well in that or not?
It depends on the child's age and the maturity and understanding. Usually the court will take the view 11, 12. That court has that the child might be of an age and be mature enough to express a wish and feeling. But then it depends on the case. Some cases, in case law, the child might have been 8, so it depends. But usually about 11 or 12.
11 or 12.
11 or 12.
Okay, because sometimes it can be really hard for the child as well, because for the child is both parents are, you know, very important, but in certain cases the child can see, oh, my dad provide me more things than mom, or mom is providing me more things. So in that case it's like he's not able to make the proper, you know,
the parents need to ensure that, you know, if there's any that they don't bring their children into the dispute, that the children are not used as pawns in between their own battles. If there's a lot of acrimony between them, and unfortunately sometimes that happens in cases. And the child is alienated. It's called parental alienation. There's no definition of parental alienation, but one party may allege that the other parent has alienated, i.e. brainwashed the child against the other parent. When the court has these type of cases before them, these children, they have to look at it's called the welfare checklist. So by law they have to consider that checklist, and the welfare of the child is of the paramount. The fundamental importance is the welfare of that child. And the court has to look at a number of factors, like can that parent meet the educational, emotional needs of that child? You know, they have to look at harm, whether that child is at risk of harm. So when we talk about harm, it's not just physical harm, it's psychological harm as well.
Emotional as well.
Emotional harms, physical harm, psychological harm as well. And that crosses over into domestic abuse as well. So when we look at, you know, where the mother might have raised allegations of domestic abuse and said, well, I don't want my child to go to that other parent, or restrict that other parent's time, because they say, well, that the child's been emotionally harmed because he's witnessed domestic abuse, and then the court would have to investigate those allegations and see whether or not, depending on the seriousness of the allegations as well. But that crops up quite a lot in these type of Children Act cases, especially with our Apane cases as well, the Asian cases as well, where the other the mother may be alleged domestic abuse, controlling, coercive behaviour, which is now going to be, so with the domestic abuse, major changes as well happening, which crosses over as well. They're going to create a legal definition under the domestic abuse bill. So there's going to be a legal definition. So domestic abuse will include, like, recognises controlling and coercive behaviour, emotional, psychological, sexual and financial abuse as well. So, and those type of allegations are raised in Children Act proceedings, and the court has a duty to investigate, and they will appoint like a CAFCAS officer, who's like the welfare officer of the court, and that CAFCAS officer will then report back to the court. He or she will do the investigation, speak to the mother, speak to the children, go to their homes and prepare a recommendation to the court.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah.
And it's like proper site to get divorce, or sometimes as you say, you have to apply for a divorce if you are going through domestic violence. But if there will be another site just for domestic violence, if somebody going through will be.
So what I'm saying is domestic violence crosses over in all. So if someone's going through a divorce, and there's children, then they have to deal with the divorce, the finances.
Absolutely, so many things in your mind.
But if they've suffered from domestic abuse, then they could cite the domestic abuse in their petition. If they're relying on the behaviour, they could become, in the Children Act proceedings as well. If they can't reach an agreement, and then if the mother suffered from domestic abuse, she could allege that, well, I've suffered domestic abuse, and I don't want my children to see that, I don't want contact to go ahead because I've suffered from domestic, and the children have witnessed this, and they're at risk of harm. So it crosses over. So domestic abuse is a big issue. We've seen in lockdown as well.
Yeah, it's rose as well, isn't it? Domestic violence.
Yeah, and there was a panorama program yesterday on the domestic on domestic abuse in lockdown. I think in the first 3 weeks of lockdown there was 11. It was reported 11 women were killed, 2 children were killed, and 1 male was killed.
Oh my God.
So, and there was a lot of pressure on the government to provide support. I think they pledged £2 million, which is, for some people is peanuts.
It's nothing.
To help charities. I mean, there's been major cuts in council budgets, so refuges have had to close all around the UK. So we've had an issue where hotels have been used as, well as refuges as well. So but the government, they are trying to pledge more money. We've got the domestic abuse bill, which is being passed through Parliament now, which is going to also stop perpetrators of domestic abuse from cross-examining their victims in family law proceedings, which at the moment it can happen. So that's going to be a new reform under the law as well. We're going to have a statutory definition of domestic abuse. Controlling coercive behaviour has become a criminal offence in 2015 as well. So I think many people who are victims of domestic abuse, they come to me and they don't know that they've suffered years and years of domestic abuse, and where the husband, through controlling coercive behaviour or financial abuse, emotional abuse, where I think the government has said that where an example could be where he is isolated, the wife or the mother from her family, or he's controlled what she can wear, or what she can her money, the accounts, said controlling all over. Said she can only wear this, or she, with her makeup, her appearance. Those are all types of abuse. They're all types of abuse. Or like, for example, she's not allowed to go out, or she has to tell him where she's going out. She's restricted from going out to see her friends or her family, or like social media, he's restricting her online. So it's all, so it's socially, mentally, emotionally, all kind of financially as well. So in the UK, who gets the custody more likely, you think? Every case is different. Every case is different, and it depends on you could have an equal shared care arrangement, or you could have a shared care, which doesn't necessarily mean 50-50. So at the end of the day, the court will look at all the circumstances of the case, they will assess the case, they will go on the CAFCAS officer's recommendations, and they will consider what's in the best interest of that child, and they will award maybe more time to which parent they feel can meet the emotional, physical needs of that child. Yes, usually some people will say that the mother has the maid, but every case is different. Every case turns on its own facts, and each case is the set of circumstances is different. But ultimately, the court will look at what is in the best interest of that child and consider that the welfare of that child is paramount, and which parent can consider, looking at the criteria, the checklist, and it's like a balancing act, and then decide which parent should have.
Can custody go to grandparents as well, or
grandparents can apply as well, but they need permission from the court. They need permission from the court. So if they want to see their children and the parents are refusing, then they can apply, but they need permission from the court to do
Can you
so.
tell us a little bit about wills as well?
So I'm not a will specialist,
Yeah.
but when I have a client who comes to me and they're about to go through the divorce proceedings, it's pertinent that I advise them that if they haven't got a will, that they make a will, or if they've got an existing will, that they update it if they're about to go through divorce proceedings, because if they die before the divorce proceedings have been finalised or concluded, and they die intestate, which means without making a will, then everything will pass to their spouse.
So wills are very important if you have children, isn't it? That's the main.
If you're about to go through a divorce, then you don't have an existing will, or you have a will, then you need to speak to a will solicitor and consider updating it or making a new will.
कि जिदा कि ऐश ने दस्सिया भी जेकर तुहाडा डिवोर्स हो रहा उस टाइम ते जरूरी है कि जेकर तुसी विल्स नहीं बनाया ते बच्चों की खातर जरूर बनाना चाहिए. एंड नाउ how to find the best solicitor actually?
How to find well, I think, like I said earlier on when we were speaking, it's important that you find a solicitor that you're comfortable with, and you speak to at least maybe 2 or 3 solicitors as well. And then finding a solicitor who you feel that you can trust as well, and who's going to listen to you and guide you through your divorce journey. And maybe a good indicator is that if you're in an initial meeting with a solicitor, they're not looking at the clock. So they're not looking at the clock, and they spend that time and give you that reassurance, and they guide you through the divorce journey and ensure that they achieve an outcome for you that's going to meet the needs of you and your children, your future needs.
Thank you.
Really important.
Thank you, Ash, for coming to Kashi TV. Thank you so much providing us very valuable information on family law. So मैं अकेला ही चला था सफ़र पर, लोग मिलते गए और एक काफिला बनता गया. मिलांगे next time again another topic दे नाल. तद तक मेरे वालों जय गुरुदेव.